Only a year ago, the Chicago Bears were considered the most devastating team in the NFL. But after Sunday, the New York Giants played like it may be their turn to do the Super Bowl shuffle. For the second consecutive year, the Buccaneers won only 2 games. But in this week's cover story, you will see why many Tampa residents still have very much to cheer about. Sid Luckman was one of the greatest quarterbacks of the NFL. It's been 40 years since he led the Bears to a championship, yet today he seems just as fit to do it again. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle joins us on Inside Interview to discuss the very important issues facing the NFL for this year and beyond.
And now, Inside the NFL with your hosts, Len Dawson and Nick Bonaconti.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are now down to the Final Four, and after this Sunday, we'll all get ready for the hype of Super Bowl 21. Nick, after watching the games this past weekend, it became very clear to me that there are 3 teams who should feel very fortunate to be still in the race. There is one team head and shoulders above all the rest, the New York Giants. Unless something drastic happens to this team, I think they should win it in a walk.
Lenny, I agree. And anybody who talks about a giant letdown is really blowing hot air. This ball club did not celebrate after their playoff win. Matter of fact, they know the whole season can go for naught unless they approach every single playoff game in a very businesslike way. They feel they can celebrate after the Super Bowl. You know, something that impresses me more than anything else about these guys is the caliber of the players on the Giants.
Talk about leadership. That word is used a lot, and it's very important, especially during the playoffs. And when you look at the Giants, that word jumps right out at you. When you take a look defensively, some of their players, linebackers, Harry Carson and Lawrence Taylor, veteran defensive end George Martin, they not only bring out the best in themselves, but they bring out the best in their teammates. It is contagious. All you have to do is look at the performance of some of their young players like Carl Banks and Jim Burt. Offensively, I think the player who best exemplifies desire and the willingness to win, as well as anybody on that team, is Phil McConkey. Now, Phil doesn't have all the natural talents that some of the people have, but his heart is as big as anyone's.
Lenny, when you talk about leadership and you talk about role models, you talk about Russ Grimm and Joe Jacoby, the Washington Redskins, 2 offensive linemen who played hurt in that ball game. Grimm with cracked ribs and Joe Jacoby with a broken hand. All these guys did is knock the Chicago Bear defenders off the football, giving George Rogers running room, and then gave Jay Schrader just enough time to get the football to Art Monk for 2 touchdown passes. Without Grimm and without Jacoby, the Skins don't win.
I want to talk about the other team that played in that ball game, the Chicago Bears. I now ask, how important is the field leadership of Jim McMahon? I don't approve of everything Jim does off the field, but when he is on the field, I've always said, here is a man who loves to play the game. He accepts the challenge of a big game. He has complete control of the huddle and the offense. Watching Doug Flutie, every time that play was over, he'd run to the sidelines, confer with Mike Ditka to get his feedback. This is no way for a quarterback to display leadership ability.
Yeah, you know what it's like, Lenny? It's like a little boy running to his mother asking her permission to do something. But you know something? Doug Flutie is going to have to stand on his own 2 feet if he's going to make it in the NFL. But what I would like to do right now is pay a little tribute to their head coach, Mike Ditka. Here's a guy who took a Chicago Bear football team and convinced them that they could win without a quarterback. This ball club won an awful lot of football games, and Ditka did a tremendous job. You know, there was a teammate of his who coaches the Denver Broncos, Dan Reeves. Dan Reeves found out that for half a season he didn't have a running game. But this week against the New England Patriots, it was that running game that beat the Patriots.
I think that was very interesting regarding that game because with John Elway hobbled in the second half with an ankle injury, they had to rely on that running game. For example, in the first half, they threw the ball 23 times. They rushed it 15 times. In the second half, they rushed it 27 times and threw it just 9 times, yet they were able to get the job done, even though the Patriots knew they had to run the football. Well, with John Elway hobbling, the rest of the team thought, hey, we can't do it solely without him, so we're going to have to put it all together. And they did, giving Dan Reeves his very first playoff victory ever.
The Denver Broncos, hoping to emerge from the shadow of 5 consecutive playoff losses since 1978, entered the mile-high zone against New England. But the Patriots were intent on defending their AFC title and extending that Broncos streak. Quarterback Tony Eason, starting after his injury Elway's touchdown led to a 10-10 halftime tie, but the Patriots played trick or treat to open the second half. Morgan's second touchdown was like taking candy from a baby, but then the Broncos shed their tame costumes and came on like monsters, chasing Eason for number 23. The Broncos controlled the ball throughout the second half and had possession twice as long as New England. But with a big play quarterback like Elway, who finished with 257 passing yards, Denver ultimately resorted to the long ball. Crowd. Will it be Denver? The Broncos travel to Cleveland on the wave of their resurgent Orange Crush defense, knowing that the last time they won a playoff game, they ended up in the Super Bowl.
It's really nice to be able to feature a guy like Vance Johnson on the show like we did last week, and then have Vance go out and catch the first long touchdown pass of the season from John Elway, and have that touchdown pass end up being the winning points in the game over the New England Patriots. But you know something, Lenny? That was as a result of a penalty on the Patriots. The Patriots were offside, and John Elway said after that ball game that he would not have thrown a football down the field if he didn't have a free play.
That Patriot mistake was just one of many. And I think when they take a look at the films, they're going to find that out. The one really glaring mistake that I think happened was with less than 2 minutes to go in the game. They're down by 3 points. They have no timeouts left. A punt Irving Fryer fielded it on the 3-yard line. To me, this is a sin. He never should have done that. He should have let it go into the end zone, taken the ball on the 20-yard line. A couple of first downs, and the way Tony Franklin kicks in that thin air, they could have tied the game and been back in it.
You know, Lenny, another thing that bothers me about the New England Patriots is the lack of leadership provided by their quarterback, Tony Eason. Now, here's a guy with a load of talent, but to me, what it looks like, he's going out for a Sunday stroll in the afternoon, rather than going out there taking control of the huddle and giving the team the direction that they're looking for. You don't get the same feeling when Steve Grogan is in the huddle. Now, people can say, well, it may be a lack of maturity on the part of Eason, but Eason has been in the league for 4 years, and it's time for him to take control of that Patriot offense if he can.
Well, unlike Tony Eason, a young man at the tender age of 23, just 2 years in the National Football League, who has taken control, is Bernie Kosar. Boy, this young man is intelligent. He is really into every football game. He really not only maintains his composure, but he kept everybody else calm when it looked like they were completely out of it. He would not let that team quit. I think that was one of the greatest come-from-behind victories I've ever seen.
No, all you have to do is look at the remarks of his players after the ball game. His teammates said, well, the last 4 minutes of that game, we kept saying, give the ball to Bernie, and Bernie will give us the points. You know, with 4 minutes left in that game, things look really bleak for Bernie and the Browns. But you know something? He had a little lady luck on his shoulder, and Bernie again turned in a third 400-yard-plus game, this time in a big playoff win for the Browns.
During the regular season, the Jets were dominant for 11 weeks and doormats for 5. And head coach Joe Walton had a few tricks up his sleeve to assure which Jet team would show up for the divisional playoff game against the Browns. Wesley Walker's 42-yard touchdown off the flea flicker gave New York a 7-0 lead, and it appeared that the Jets' quick strike capabilities, which had once made them the most exciting offense in football, were alive and kicking again. The ease with which Walker scored indeed caused wide-eyed disbelief, but the Browns immediately struck back as Bernie Kosar launched a 98-yard drive, culminating with his 37-yard touchdown pass to Herman Fontenot, number 28. This ability to battle back set the tone for the game. Suddenly, the Jets were left breathless as they barely had 4 minutes to savor their lead. Neither team would score a touchdown until the final period as the respective defenses took center stage. The Browns recorded 9 sacks, forced starter Pat Ryan out of the game with a groin pull, and victimized his replacement, Ken O'Brien, as well. Meanwhile, the Jet defense pressured Kosar, who had the lowest interception percentage in the league, into 2 turnovers. Russell Carter's theft ended Kosar's streak of 132 passes without an interception, and more importantly, thwarted the Browns' drive deep in Jet territory. Momentum was shifting toward New York. Mark Gastineau taunted the hostile crowd with his mouth. Freeman McNeil let his legs speak for themselves. One play after Kosar tossed his second interception, McNeil sprinted 25 yards for a score and a 20-10 lead. Kosar sought to redeem himself and more than made up for his miscues, setting playoff passing records by completing 33 of 64 for 489 yards. With just under 2 minutes to play, Kosar directed the Browns to the 1-yard line where Kevin Max scored to pull the Browns within 3. Just as the spark for the Browns' glorious comeback was ignited, the fire in the New Yorkers' eyes seemed to be extinguished. Frustration had set in for the Jets, a foe almost as dangerous as Bernie Kosar. Operating with no timeouts and precious little time, Kosar connected with Webster Slaughter for 37 yards down to the Jets' 5. With 7 seconds remaining in regulation, Mark Mosley kicked the tying field goal to wipe the slate clean and send the game into overtime. It took the combination of the Browns' oldest and youngest players to mount a stirring recovery from the cold breath of playoff extinction. And once the overtime began, it would be these two figures, Mosley and Kozar, who would be cast in the central roles once again. On the Browns' first overtime possession, Kozar brilliantly directed Cleveland again to the Jets' 5-yard line and called on Mosley for a repeat performance of his game-tying kick. But this time he was the heel, not the hero. Mosley's third miss of the day caused the Jets to rejoice, but ultimately it only prolonged New York's agony. Few players, notably kickers, get a second chance, but fate smiled kindly on Mark Mosley and the Cleveland Browns. 27 yards, and what seemed like an eternity later, Mosley gave the Browns a 23-20 double overtime victory. For the Jets, this game typified their season. A roller coaster all the way, something to take pride in, yet little consolation for their tremendous downfall at the end. It took the third longest game in history to do it, but the Browns were on their way to the AFC Championship game. They had achieved their first playoff win since 1969 and can hold their heads proud and high, for they will be the favorites to represent their conference in Super Bowl 21.
This post-game celebrating by the Browns, I can understand. I think they really deserve it because that was one of the biggest victories in the history of the Browns organization. But it's not going to mean as much if they don't defeat the Denver Broncos this Sunday. To analyze that matchup is the coach, Allie Sherman, former head coach of the New York Giants. Allie, let's talk about that matchup between the Broncos and the Cleveland Browns. Talk to us first, if you would, about the Cleveland Browns.
All right, the Cleveland Browns. The first thing we say is they're characterized as a winner. 4 quarters. They're a 4-quarter ball club. They've won in the last few minutes many times. The guy who moves all of this is Bernie Kosar. He's the orchestra leader. He orchestrates a beautiful pass offense. For a young quarterback, he's got great ability to know where his receivers are and to put the ball out there with the right touch. By the way, they call him heavy-footed. Len, they never called you that, right? They call him heavy-footed, but he's got the mobility, and I'm sure he's going to get pressure from defensive end Rulon Jones of Denver and Carl Mecklenburg, that blitzing linebacker, sir. You know about that. Here, take a look at Bernie now. He's out in front, behind his guard, waits for his receiver to get open, and bang, perfect pass. These are the things I was talking about. He understands where his people are going to be. He's got the touch that a real good passer needs. Now we're going to take a look at Bernie. He sees a blitz coming from the Bears. Bang, he does the thing everybody wants to do. Quick slant pass to Brennan, and he's got a touch. The only problem with that is he eyeballed Brennan all the way. He's got to be careful in future games. You can bet Denver's looking at that, right? And Joe Collier says to his linebackers, hey, as soon as Kosar looks for that quick pass, I want your linebackers to get bang right into that passing plane. True?
True.
What about the running game?
The running game, there's a guy on that club by the name of Kevin Mack who was hurt early in the season. But Kevin has got all his tools ready. He's big, he's strong, but he can shift gears. Watch him here. He sees daylight and then he puts it on. He's beating some fast people when he strides out like that. And I believe you're going to see an awful lot of Kevin. I think it will be a mix of Kosar spreading the ball around with passes and Mack taking advantage of those gaps once they start to move out to cover those receivers.
What about defense?
Defense, when you talk about defense, they've got 2 cornerbacks who are 2 of the best, I think the best cornerbacks. I think you do too, Nick. Minifield and Dixon. Watch him here. Here's Bernie Esiason trying to go back there to throw a ball, and he's looking for his receiver. He's going to throw it, right? He's a good thrower, but there's old Dixon. Perfect technical way to knock a pass down and cover a receiver. Dixon and Minifield can play right up on the line of scrimmage, as you see here against Miami. That's 31, Minifield. They play bump and run against these receivers so that they can ride with them and play real tight. You know what that does? What he did out there gives Cleveland much more defensive support for end runs, as we saw there. And that's why I think Cleveland's a complete club both ways.
Let's talk about the Denver Broncos. Okay. First, their offense.
Okay. You know what offense is with the Denver Broncos, John Elway, and that's it. But I find a problem. He's a big play guy. Here is an upside Elway doing the right thing, poised in the pocket and throws to tight end Mobley. By the way, Mobley has only caught about 12 passes this year, but because Dixon and Minifield, I think, are going to do a job on the wide receivers, look for Elway to throw that ball to Mobley much more in this ball game. He's a tight end that will get in there against a slow safety.
What about their running game?
Their running game, they have a running game, but they don't use it much. You know what? You take a look at their runner now. You know what the best thing happened? Here's their runner, Sammy Winder. This guy is good to get you 4, 6, 8. He can cut. Okay? I think they should use him more. That helps the game a lot more.
And then you got the defense. Who do you like on defense?
Defense? Well, when you talk defense, they've got a defensive coach who uses a lot of different fronts and alignments and coverages. But they have 2 people who are the spark plugs. One of them, Rulon Jones, number 75. As you see him here, beat 2 blockers and take the passer down. Jones is great pressure. He will be on Kosar, and that's why they're going to roll Kosar out a little. And along with that, number 77, who just recovered that ball, is Carl Mecklenburg. He's always around the ball.
Okay, Al, you got to stay with us because we're going to come back to you later in the show. But right now, we're going to go to our NFL cover story, which is about a city in Florida that got so fed up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that they adopted the Cleveland Browns. That's right, Clearwater, Florida, and their newspaper clearly gave their readership a choice.
All that great football up north this weekend, and I'm sent to Florida to cover a story. So I rent me a convertible, get ready for some nice weather. Well, nice try anyway. There's been a lot of talk lately surrounding the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The franchise, Vinny Testaverde, will he be their savior after another dismal season? Or what about the hiring of new head coach Ray Perkins? Maybe this combination will produce the winning solution. But wait, a few months ago in Clearwater, just south of Tampa, the local newspaper came up with a very unique answer to the Bucs' problems.
We got together as a sports department and decided let's find a team that we can give the fans as an option, a team that they can look to on Sunday afternoons if the Bucs lose. So we kicked around a number of teams and threw out all the high-profile teams, and we just picked the Browns. We wanted to pick a team that was going to be fun. We wanted to make it a fun and kind of a novel thing. So we looked in the central division of the AFC, which is the opposite division of the Bucs in the NFC. And the Browns kind of jumped out because, as it happens, a Clearwater High School graduate plays on the team, Scott Nicholas. There's a special teams man and a backup linebacker. And then we thought, what other local ties might there be? And we have Cleveland Street's our main drag in downtown Clearwater. We have a Cleveland Plaza. The other day I found out we have a Browns court here, and then I found out that the Browns nose tackle, Pazzulli, his father-in-law lives in Clearwater, and he happened to be in Clearwater the weekend that we ran our first column, and his father-in-law was telling me what a big charge they got out of it. Bernie Kosar's aunt, Carol, who lives in Palm Harbor, she wrote a letter and just signed Carol Kosar, and I called her back the next day, and sure enough, there was the relationship there, and she loves the Bucs too, and she loves the Browns for obvious reasons.
Dan, with your idea to adopt the Browns, is this an effort to convert Buck fans to Brown fans?
Not necessarily. The way we presented it was, let's let the fans have an option. We didn't do it to necessarily condemn the Bucs. We just said this is the way it is. The Bucs are losing every game, and just for a safety valve for their own sanity, let them have another team to cheer for. On the Sundays when the Bucs lost, which was just about every Sunday, along with the Browns story in Monday's paper, we would run a little label that said Buck fan optional, so the Buck fan could read the Buck story and cry or whatever it is they want to do, and they could turn the page and see, oh, Buck fan optional. You know, I got a lot of phone calls from people in Pinellas County and in the area who said it's a great idea. You know, we're sick and tired of the Bucs. We need something else, and they took it in the right vein of it being a fun thing. I got some letters from Buck fans who weren't so nice about it. Some of them who thought it was a horrible idea, and that if we wanted to cheer for the Browns, we should move back to Cleveland.
This Clearwater pub is where new and transplanted Browns fans cheer their team on, and their victory over the Jets Saturday left them with a tribute to the Browns' dog defense.
From Clearwater suggested that Clearwater adopt the Browns as their adopted team. Holly from Clearwater, son. So it seemed like a good idea at the time, and all my son's a Browns fan, so I'm with the Browns.
What a coincidence. All this Browns mania coming together in Clearwater, Florida. Maybe I can convince some of these guys to start pulling for the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, that's the ticket. Let me check that out.
Because the Browns enjoy the home field advantage, they've been saying the road to Pasadena is through Cleveland. But after watching these Florida fanatics, I think there's a detour through Clearwater, Florida. And I also think that the enthusiasm of these fans indicates just how popular this game is throughout the country. And our special guest this week is a man that I think is personally responsible for the popularity of the game that we know it today. He is a commissioner of the National Football League, Mr. Pete Rozelle. Pete, thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Lenny.
You know, the success of the National Football League is legendary, but there have been rocky roads along the way that you've had to be confronted with various issues, and we'd like to address some of those issues on the show this week, if you don't mind. First of all, instant replay. We've talked to several people on this show, including people in the National Football League, and they have voiced their opinions of instant replay. I'd like to know your opinion.
Well, it was tough to start with because the people utilizing had to more or less learn on the job. You couldn't just learn in advance of the job. And it's like an air traffic controller. You have to be glued to that monitor and watching every play rather than watching the game on the field. And it's very intense. We had problems with it early, but we haven't lately. And it was very interesting, as a matter of fact. We had one recall change for every 900 plays, or one replay switch for every 6 games. So there weren't many changes, but the ones that were made, if they're correct, but the coaches want it that way.
One criticism I've heard is, boy, it takes too long. It's supposed to speed up the game. It really hasn't. How can you correct that?
Well, just with the people in the booth. And the problem is that when you see a replay and they're looking at it, and then another one comes up, a better angle, they have to tape that on the other set and look at that. So that the problem is when they don't get a conclusive shot first on the replay and television comes up with 2 or 3 later, that's what takes the time.
Regarding dirty play in the National Football League, a lot of our viewers have called in on our Super Poll to the Super Bowl question saying that 78% of them said that the 2-game suspension of Charles Martin for the conduct on Jim McMahon, injuring Jim McMahon in that ball game, was really not enough. The first question I have to you is, how did you decide on a 2-game suspension? And the second one, how are you going to deter this type of conduct in the NFL?
Well, I would say that I decided on that subjectively, as I have to in all disciplinary actions. It's the worst part of the job for 27 years, imposing discipline on owners or players. And I evaluated. I had a hearing with Charles Martin. I talked to him. It was an interesting thing. He said that what caused it, he was standing behind Jim McMahon. He saw the interception, and he realized that he had a different role. Rather than a defensive lineman, he had become an offensive lineman. He had to block. And he was used to grabbing people, rushing like a defensive lineman. And he said he grabbed Jim McMahon and he threw him down. He knew he was wrong. And in evaluating all points of it, I decided that 2 games suspension would be appropriate.
Pete, I want to ask you about artificial surface. All the players that I've talked to, I don't like it, Nick doesn't like it, yet they have it on so many fields. What can be done about this situation?
Well, nothing, of course, in the dome stadiums. We have 6 or 7 of those. And the main thing that can be done is to improve the artificial turf. And hopefully, as years go on, they will continue to improve it, because you have to have artificial turf in the indoor stadiums, and some outdoor stadiums aren't controlled by the football team. A community puts up a new stadium, they spend maybe $150 million on it, and then they want to get complete amortization, where they can have baseball, football, a rock concert in there. They want to help pay back the stadium. So that's the problem that we have. But I think that if we can just improve, that the industry can improve the quality of the artificial turf, that's what we really need.
Pete, I want to talk a little bit about the drug situation. Steroids right now is in vogue. Everybody's talking about steroids, the artificial building up of the players and their muscles. What is the owner's position going to be going into the 1987 negotiations, and are we going to have random mandatory drug testing?
Well, on the latter, of course, I had it in my program, which the arbitrator ruled that I couldn't impose. So I'm hopeful that the clubs will take a strong position on drugs. I've talked to Gene Upshaw about it. He seems to want a good program, and I think it's just paramount that we do. Right now, we have the right to test at the preseason physicals, minicamp or preseason training camp. and also on reasonable cause. But I think you also have to have 2 unscheduled tests. And on steroids, it's a new thing. It's not like a illegal drug, but it's a very serious thing because a great many things can happen to you. They're just learning of them, medical problems. And we have to have our players stop using them. But to know that they're using them, we have to be able to test, and that's the problem.
Are the owners going to be firm going to negotiations? How firm are they going to be?
The ones I've talked to feel very strongly about it and claim they're going to be very firm.
Pete, we should stay with this because we want to talk to you right after this next segment. They say that this year's New York Giants, because of the record, is similar to last year's Chicago Bears. But when you take a look at what's behind me, you got Jim McMahon, and also you've got Harry Carson dumping the Gatorade on his coach. Well, the records may be similar, but the personalities definitely are different.
An anxious Bill Parcells bore the look of a worried man as his Giants prepared to play the 49ers. His concerned countenance worsened to outright anguish when early in the game, the Niners' Jerry Rice appeared headed for 6 points. Not so fast, Jerry. The NFL's finest wide receiver in 1986 incredibly dropped the ball, and when all was said and done, the Giants had recovered the fumble in their own end zone for a touchback. The play occurred 2 minutes into the game. With it went any chance the 49ers had to defeat the Giants. An 80-yard drive followed that ended with this Phil Simms to Mark Bavaro touchdown as the Giants never looked back. Their vaunted defense took charge, completely shutting down the run and forcing 49er quarterbacks Joe Montana and Jeff Kemp to hurry their throws all day. For the Giants, it was defensive football at its most uplifting. The single play that ended the competitive phase of this contest and the season for Joe Montana came late in the first half, when the NFC Defensive Player of the Year, Lawrence Taylor, number 56, took this interception into the end zone for the score that put the Giants in front 28-3. But the Giants had proven they were winners well before Taylor's touchdown. This was a team determined to embrace excellence, and they did so in every way possible, including a fake field goal that saw kicker Raul Alegre shift to the outside, leaving the 49ers startled and confused. What it also left was Mark Bavaro wide open to catch Jeff Rutledge's pass that set up yet another Giants touchdown. In 1986, few Giant victories were achieved without the brilliant running of Joe Morris, number 20, and this game was no exception. The diminutive Dynamo ran for 159 yards against the third-best rushing defense in pro football, highlighted by a 45-yard touchdown burst that showed little Joe at his best, a relentless combination of quickness and power that wears down even the league's better defenses week in and week out. This total Giants victory perhaps was enjoyed most by quarterback Phil Simms. At times, number 11 seemed to be a forgotten man in this record-setting season. But against the 49ers, he soared to heights few have reached in the playoffs. Simms became only the third quarterback in NFC playoff history to throw 4 touchdown passes in one game. And his quartet of scoring strikes also established a new Giants playoff standard. The package was complete, and it was wrapped very snugly in a 49-3 domination that left 49ers coach Bill Walsh believing that the Giants may well be the most powerful team in the NFL. For Bill Parcells, the news is especially good. His team is peaking at just the right time, and their opponent in the championship game is the Redskins, who they have already beaten twice this season.
As we take a look at some of the stars from that Giants championship team of some 23 years ago, I noticed that Y.A. Tittle and Frank Gifford look just about the same, but our man, the coach, Allie Sherman, seems to have touched up his hair with a little gray coloring. Well, the man who's been the commissioner of the National Football League for 27 years, Pete Rozelle, you look exactly the same, Pete, as you did when you were a youngster coming into this crazy business. My question to you is regarding free agency. You've heard the question that they say the owners really don't care because they all share in that TV revenue. What's your response to this?
Well, I think the sharing is one of the main factors for success of the National Football League. If you're a player in a small market with Green Bay or San Diego, Buffalo, you're very happy that they're sharing the television money equally with New York and Los Angeles because it enables them to pay you more money. I think that to say the owners don't care is really very misleading. They're paying the players an average of $225,000. They have $65,000 in so-called fringe benefits, severance pay, bonus clauses, pension, playoff games. So that's about $290 average for 55 players, a team, including injured players. I think they do care. I know the players feel strongly about free agency. They're going to take it up with the Management Council during the negotiations on the new collective bargaining agreement. And I just hope that they can reach agreement, some compromise, as they did last time, to keep something in place so that all clubs will continue to flourish and offer a good opportunity for players to work with them.
Has anybody ever brought up the thought of perhaps having a pot of gold for the Super Bowl for the owners to be an incentive?
I've heard the players suggest that, but the owners, none of the owners have ever brought up at league meeting.
Pete, I want to ask you a little bit about your relationship with Al Davis. People have said that some of the problems that have emanated from the National Football League have come because of a personal feud between the two of you, such as Al moving from Oakland to Los Angeles because he couldn't communicate and talk to you, and then the subsequent lawsuit. How do you address these charges?
Well, going back to the original thing of his move from Oakland to Los Angeles, I asked him in a league meeting, I said, do you intend to move to Los Angeles? And he said in front of myself and his 27 partners, yes. I said, do you intend to, according to the Constitution and bylaws, to ask for permission of the league? He said no. And I don't have a personal feud with Al. I just get involved in all the court cases because I'm the commissioner. But he sued his 27 partners. He testified against them in the USFL case just last year. And it's not a case of me being against Al Davis. I can sit down and talk to him if he wants to. But I think he likes to build it up as a personal feud rather than the fact it's a feud with his 27 partners.
Let me ask you about the game down the road. How do you see perhaps some changes in the professional game down the road?
You know, Lenny, that's so hard to come up with. You know, when you started, I'm sure when you look at a tape or a film of a game today, you see great changes made in the sport. They were talking of the rolling pocket of the Chiefs being the key factor in the 1970s, the new offense. I think that there will be changes. About 60% of the rule changes we make are for safety, and I'm sure they'll continue working on that. And also they're going to work with manufacturers to hope to improve the artificial turf. That'll be a big factor. Other than that, it's amazing. There's always something new. At the Meadowlands, the giant game with San Francisco, that fake field goal with the kicker going out as a flanker. I've watched football since about 1942, I guess, in high school. I've never seen that. The coaches really come up with something different every year.
Pete, 27 years as the commissioner of the National Football League. How much longer do you want to go on?
Well, Nick, I've got 5 years on my contract. And my present feeling is to, you know, as long as I enjoy it, I'll stay in office if they want me. And if I decide that for some reason I'd be happier in retirement, why, I'll do that. But I have no plans to retire at this time.
Pete, thank you very much for being on the show. We really appreciate it, and we hope that the NFL continues to have vision and solve the problems that come before them and continue to make this sport, I think, the best in America.
Thank you.
You know, the Chicago Bears thought they solved their quarterback problems when they signed Doug Flutie. But on Sunday, they found out that Doug left his Merlin dust at home.
For 3 seasons, Soldier Field has been the toughest place to win for visiting teams. And in the playoffs last season, neither the Rams nor Giants could manage a single point here. This year, the record-setting Bears defense was even better. And even before Mike Singletary put his menacing game face on, experts had written off the banged-up Redskins. But what the experts had failed to realize was that Washington and Jay Schrader were more than ready, and they too had their game faces on. Number 45, Gary Fensick, Wilbur Marshall, and Mike Singletary would blitz early and often as they had all season long. But ex-baseball player Jay Schrader, who had faced 100-mile-an-hour Dwight Gooden fastballs in the minors, stood tough in the batter's box and hit a mighty home run to open the scoring. Art Monk hauled in Schrader's perfectly lofted 28-yard touchdown pass. And as is often the case, when the Bears send everybody but Mayor Harold Washington, someone gets through. And number 76, Steve McMichael, did. But Schrader was not intimidated by the big bear paw in his face. "6'4" Schrader had done his job. And for a time, 5'9" Doug Flutie did his by pump-faking Darrell Green out of the play and hitting Willie Gault for a 50-yard score early in the second quarter. Gault's touchdown tied this divisional playoff at 7 and sparked Chicago to a 13-7 third-quarter lead. But in the end, this battle would be won or lost by the quarterbacks. And in only his second pro start, lucky little leprechaun Doug Flutie was ripped up and strewn about Soldier Field like a losing lottery ticket. Frail seedling among NFL redwoods like 6'6", 270-pound Charles Mann, Flutie had his passes batted in his face or picked off. After a pair of Redskin interceptions, the stage was set once more for Jay Schrader and Art Monk. Monk and Schrader helped the Redskins to a 14-13 lead. Again, the Bears blitzed, and again they were beaten as Schrader rolled out of trouble, bought time, and waited for Monk to clear. To say that Schrader was simply invincible would not be completely true. He did fumble once and throw an interception. But while everyone else was losing their heads, Schrader managed to keep his, although just barely. The Bears, however, lost their cool as a Payton fumble and a pass interference penalty opened the door for George Rogers and closed the door on the defending world champions. A headline in Chicago's Saturday newspaper read, "The Bears are ready if the Redskins show up." The Redskins did indeed show up, and they won 27-13. Mike Ditka left with thoughts of Jim McMahon eating tacos, the fridge selling paper towels, and a music video echoing in his ears. Escorted not by media hounds all the way to Super Bowl 21, but by security guards into a silent locker room.
The Bears lost. They're out of the playoffs. That also means they're lost their rights to this year's Super Bowl Shuffle. I'm going to show you something about Iron Mike Ditka that I don't think that you really can believe. Nick, what do you think of Iron Mike?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think Iron Mike has had a meltdown, Lenny. Can you imagine if George Halas was still alive and he saw his head coach doing the shuffle?
Maybe playing without a quarterback all year has really affected Mike. Coach, when you were coaching a couple of years ago, what type of a dance would you do for this shuffle?
God bless Iron Mike. I tell you, I was trying to fit myself, Len. I was trying to fit myself into gear for a nice Blue Danube waltz.
Nice, slow and easy. I can understand that. I want to understand about this Washington Giants game. Let's take the Washington Redskins. Give me 3 points that you think are important.
Okay, Washington's offense and defense. First, Jay Schrader and Kelvin Bryant on offense, and then the Washington defense. Let's take a look at Jay Schrader, who's a poised quarterback, but he must not get forced into the long ball game against the Giants, who rush and pressure a quarterback so hard. Here, he's poised, got a bad habit there, one hand on the ball as he's dropping. Lawrence Taylor will want that thing if he doesn't put 2 hands on it. And here he goes to Didier, who is, by the way, another exceptional receiver because he plays both tight end and receiver on the wide side, and he can pressure that defense real tough. And I think he's been hurt. He's coming along. Along with that, let's take a look at the guy that I mentioned, the one that can really help Jay Schrader, and that is Kelvin Bryant, number 24. He's a back that can come out of the backfield and catch passes, and he does it. I think he's one of the best pass receivers I've seen in the league in the last 10 years. And he can do that equally well as a wide receiver and give cornerbacks a lot of trouble. And by the way, Bryant is an excellent runner. I think the Washington Redskins should use him more on first down situations so that that Giant defense can't key in and play run when Rodgers is in there. They've got to worry about pass too. Now the defense of the Washington Redskins. Let's take a look at those babies. They must play a big front as they're doing here against Eric Dickerson. In other words, 5, 6 men on the line of scrimmage so that they can stuff a runner, because they're going to be facing Joe Morris, who has a great ability to take that cut and accelerate through the gaps. Now, on defense, they've got to stay that way. Otherwise, there'll be gaps that will let Joe Morris go, and they won't get that pass rush. This is what they've got to do. They've got to be ready to pressure Morris and pressure Sims.
How about the Giants? What are the 3 ingredients for the Giants if they're going to beat the Washington Redskins?
All right, the Giants have one major ingredient, and we all know that, and that's that defense. However, let's take a look at their offense. Sims is the major key, and he's got a second key, and that is Joe Morris. Here he is. You know, Phil Sims, watch this. He throws the ball with a guy hanging on him, and he's got the strength to lay that thing out there. I think defenses have not estimated the strength of that Sims arm. He's thrown a lot of balls pinpoint passing. And that's what they've got. That's what the Redskins have to be concerned about. They've either got to hurry him an awful lot, or they've got to mix it up. A lot of pressure and then drop back into coverages that make him take longer. He's got a great guy to go to, too. And that's the one I've been talking about, Joe Morris. This little guy, and he isn't that little, he's got great balance, and he and Walter Payton have the greatest body control I've ever seen runners have, where when they see a little daylight, they can shift their gears, change direction, and accelerate. And that's what you see him doing here. Now, let's go and get on to the Giant defense. You can talk about all of the guys on that defense, but there are 2 main people they talk about, right? Lawrence Taylor. There's another man. He had a big day last week, and that's Carl Banks, number 58, as you see him here. Banks is Taylor's clone. He's built like he is. He's got the same strength. He's got the same swiftness. He's got the same anger. You know, if I were playing the Giants, I wouldn't run at Banks. He's a little soft on pass defense right now with inexperience. I'd throw at him. And I wouldn't pass at Lawrence Taylor. He's had some experience. I'd run at Lawrence Taylor.
Allie, stay with us because we want to talk to you again a little bit later in the show. But that was a terrific evaluation. But right now what we want to do is we want to take a look at a guy who's equally adept at running a business as throwing a football. In our Where Are They Now segment, we are privileged to visit with a guy who helped create the monsters of the Midway, Sid Luckman.
Youth is a state of the mind. You must think young. You must never think about age or how old you are, because age is only relative.
Legendary Chicago Bears quarterback, Hall of Famer Sid Luckman shows no signs of easing up as he approaches his 70th birthday.
I just think I'm 21 years of age. I like to feel as though I'm 21. I like to get up in the morning invigorated and happy that I've been able to work out. The good Lord has blessed me with a good health where I can have physically fit to do the things I want to do. So to me, age is irrelevant.
Starting in 1939 under George Halas and the Bears, he made the T formation famous. Led by Luckman, the Bears became the monsters of the Midway, recording victories like a 73-0 championship win over the Redskins, and a game in which Sid threw 7 touchdown passes against the Giants. Retiring in 1950, he stayed on to help coach.
I love the Chicago Bears, and one of the greatest thrills of my life was last football season, because I lived every moment. I lived it with Ditka, I lived it with McMahon, I lived it with Peyton, with the Fridge, with the defense. It was just a magnificent time in my life, and I couldn't wait for each Sunday and to see the success of that team.
Success follows Sid. In 1947, he bought into a packaging company called Cellucraft. He remembered the struggle to support his family while putting himself through college.
It was tough times, and I realized then that what comes first and what really is important in life, and I dedicated myself to try to make a success as best as I could so I would never go through those kind of times again.
And he hasn't, due partially to the major financial success of Cellucraft, where he's still actively involved.
I love the industry, I love the business, I love the excitement. It gives me something to look forward to anticipate. When I wake up in the morning, I can reach out to feel I have something to do, and I think life is more exciting when you feel that way.
Today, a wealthy, respected businessman living on Chicago's Gold Coast, Sid's magnificent apartment with its original masterpieces should be on lifestyles of the rich and famous. A generous and humble man, Sid's surroundings reflect a depth and warmth mixed with a rich past. He values friendship above all else.
A lot of people have had a marvelous impact upon my life. Coach Halas, who I worshipped and admired and been with for over 40 years, adopted me as a son, the second son. And a lot of people helped me on the way up. A lot of people have helped me now. So when they're passing their love upon me, I've tried to pass my love upon them. And I've always said in life, you must tell people to love them.
Having lost both his wife and his dear friend Halas in recent years, Sid donates much of his time to friends and charities. This extraordinary man is a true legend of the game.
I can reach back 50 years as though it was yesterday, and a year from now seems so far away. But each day passes so quickly, and before you know it, the year passes. And I've learned in life, you never look back only upon pleasant, wonderful thoughts. It's not how long you live, it's the quality of life that you have while you're living.
Sid Luckman is the Chicago Bear quarterback of the past, and this man helped revolutionize football. The present quarterback is Jim McMahon, and these guys, Lenny, are about as different as night and day. But they have one thing in common: they enjoy and love the game of football.
Isn't it great, Nick? Perhaps there's hope for you and me in our reclining years. We should look as good as Sid Luckman when we're 70 years old. I have met this man. He is a beautiful person. He loves football. He loves the Chicago Bears. He's proud of his accomplishments, and he really treasures his friendships. This man is a class act.
Talking about a class act, our correspondent Howie Long is in a class all by himself. This past week, he was named Defensive Lineman of the Year by the fans. You know something? Howie Long is an impact player, and this guy keeps offensive coordinators up many nights trying to figure out how to block him.
Because Howie Long was voted the Defensive Lineman of the Year, $25,000 was donated in his name to the charity of his choice, and he chose the Athletes for Children organization in the Los Angeles area. I think we found through this show that Howie is not only just a football player, but he is a very sensitive individual, and there's going to be life after football for this talented young man. Well, let's go to Howie now and find out what he thought of some of the action last week in the playoff games.
Hi, folks. I just spent the past weekend in New York, and I gotta tell you, the New York papers don't do justice to the accident I witnessed at Giant Stadium. I mean, have you ever been driving down the highway and all of a sudden traffic comes to a standstill? Now, you know there's an accident up ahead and it looks real bad, but when you drive past, you still slow down and look anyway, even though you might think it's an unpleasant sight. Well, that's what I felt like this past weekend in East Rutherford. And at one point during the game, I was thinking maybe I should have just driven by this car accident. This was the first game I had been to where I wasn't playing. So I definitely had an opportunity to look at things from a different perspective. And it was worse than any accident I had ever seen. It was a gloomy sight seeing Joe Montana being loaded into an ambulance. I mean, Joe's a friend of mine and such a competitor. And I just wanted to tell him, hey, Joe, everything's going to be okay. Boy, those Giants, they had very, very serious ideas about advancing to the NFC Championship game. And much like that Mack truck that crosses over the mid-divider, you either get out of the way or you get crushed. This Mack truck from New Jersey also has something called chemistry. So much chemistry, you think that they were put together in a lab. And when you look at the way they're beating people up, they've got to remind you of that Bears team from a year ago. But there's one major difference. No characters, no controversies, and all the players like the coach. Basically, this team is comprised of hard-working team players who have quietly and methodically kicked some butt. A lot of these players on the Giants are the best in the business. But what's refreshing to me is that these guys aren't real concerned about getting any special attention. And I think the credit should be given to Bill Parcells and the Giants organization for putting together one heck of a football team. Now, I'll be honest. I had my doubts before this past weekend. I thought the San Francisco 49ers matched up well against the Giants. But it was over before the Giants even got the cooler full of Gatorade to dump on Coach Parcells. Now, this weekend, the Giants play another tough team in the Redskins. A Redskins team that on another week or in another year might have a shot. But this week, I like the Mack truck, the New York Giants, who are moving a little bit faster than 55 miles per hour. And speed does kill. See you next week, folks.
Howie, Howie, Howie. Boy, that's a real tough pick, picking the New York Giants, the hottest team in football. Why don't you pick the Cleveland-Denver game? That's the tough one.
Nick, I want to refresh the memory of our viewers. Our first show, the preview show of 1986, we had a segment called Changing for the Better. We selected a couple of teams that made changes, hopefully for the better. The Cleveland Browns won. They changed their offensive coordinator. Lindy Infante came on. And the other, the Philadelphia Eagles, they hired a new head coach by the name of Buddy Ryan.
Well, we were 1 for 2. Anyways, Lindy Infante did a terrific job bringing Bernie Kosar along, opening up that Brown offense. But what about Buddy Ryan and the Eagles?
I'd say school is still out, and if they don't do better next year, the owner might be thinking about changing for the better again.
Hey, we did better, though. We had another preseason show called Packing for Pasadena. And we, inside the NFL, and yours truly, Nick Buoniconti, picked the Giants and the Denver Broncos to end up in the Super Bowl. Both these teams are still hot, and they're in the playoffs coming up this week. What about you?
See, my teams will be watching the game from Los Angeles, and they'll also be practicing the Mike Ditka shuffle up in Chicago. But, you know, that was before. Let's take a look what happened last week with the three of us. Nick, once again, you are on a roll. But the coach, man, I tell you, 1 and 3, you got some work ahead of you. Looking overall in the playoff record, it's all very, very close. But that's last time. Let's talk about what's coming up, the championship games. Coach, you've got Denver at Cleveland. How do you like it?
You're a nice guy,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I had a heck of a weekend, didn't I? And I came right back to you two guys. You're a little cocky, too. All right, look, Denver. I think the best thing that happened to Denver last week was John Elway getting hurt. Because he hurt his ankle, they went to the running game, and they should have been using that most of the season. And along with that, John threw some moderate, medium-range passes, kept them in the ballgame. I don't think it's enough, though, because Arthur Modell told me what the boy, Bernie Kosar, did in the last 4 minutes of that Cleveland Jet game. He said to the guys, hey, fellas, if each of you do your job, I'm going to do mine. I'm going to take us in. Isn't that beautiful with a young quarterback? So I'm picking Cleveland.
All right, Nick, what about you?
Well, Denver, Mecklenburg, and Rulon Jones on defense. I think the cornerbacks, I think this game shapes up real good. I think it's strength against strength. I'm not so sure that was an aberration, the running game of the Denver Broncos. I'm not so sure Winder and Will Hayden can do it again. But Cleveland, on the other hand, has a great quarterback in Kosar. But I'm not so sure that they're going to have it all together. I'm really going out on a limb. I'm going to pick the Denver Broncos on the road against the Cleveland Browns.
I think you're right when you said it could go either way. This is a real good matchup. I saw the Cleveland Browns earlier in the season. Their defense is much better today than it was in the middle of the season. For that reason, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. All right, we've got the Giants hosting the Washington at the Meadowlands. Coach.
Okay, Washington. Depends on how Jay Schrader keeps his patience and stays with a medium-range passing game and can stay with offense. However, that's not going to last too long. I think by the third quarter, they're going to get him a little impatient because the Giant defense intimidates a whole ball club, not only the offensive ball club of the other team, but the defense. Because they sit there and say, 1, 2, 3, kick, 1, 2, 3, kick. We've got to come off. I pick Giants.
Well, I'll tell you what, Lenny, I have to say one thing about the New York Giants. The word is intensity. That ball club has been able to maintain it for almost the entire season. They had the momentum. They're playing aggressive football. They're playing smart football. I like the Giants.
I think we've talked about the Giants in this show, saying that they right now are the cream of the crop of the 4 teams that are involved in this race for the Super Bowl. And I would have to say they are so strong. If they play anywhere near like they did last week, the Giants have got to win it. But there you have it. That's our show. We sure hope you enjoyed it, and we sure hope you'll join us again next week right here on HBO's Inside the NFL.
This has been a presentation of HBO Sports, the network of champions.